Assalamu alaikum. Today we're going to start with the lecture number 23, and before going with lecture number 23, the old routine, let's have a recap what we did in lecture number 22. And we talked about climate change and what is the difference between weather, climate change and climate. After covering those concepts, we moved on that what is the climate change science, in which we talked about global warming, greenhouse effect, and what is happening that is making the planet Earth warming up. And one of the basic reasons that we came across was that apart from the natural processes, the humans have started getting busy in a number of activities which is warming up the planet, and because of that the climate change is happening. And that climate change has very negative impacts on the society as well as on the humanity. What were the major impacts? Some of them were on the environment, that was the water. We have the water security issue, we have the agriculture, we have the transport issue, we have health issues. So all those were the impacts that we studied in detail in the last lecture. Later on we talked about that how we can mitigate. We said that okay, the way the glaciers are receding, well, we need to understand the science in Pakistan. We need to have more rigorous research in terms of looking at that what are the impacts of climate change at the moment and what we can do in future in order to mitigate these impacts. Well, ladies and gentlemen, today the lecture continues with another climate change series, and this one is very important. Important in a sense that we are talking from the perspective of Government of Pakistan. That we submitted two reports. One was in one was basic communication, initial communication on climate change to UNFCCC, and later on, quite some time after quite some years, like few years back, we did another communication report which was prepared by the task force which was formed by the Prime Minister at that point of time, and then they came up with another climate change report, and later on we have this climate change policy. So these are the three main official communications in terms of climate change. So as policymakers, we are required to understand what were these reports, what were the weaknesses. So this was one of my papers that I and a team of few researchers we did, and we wanted to look at that what is the disconnect between Pakistan's climate change policies and documents. So we don't feel that there is some synergy between this communication, and it has been something out of place. So we did a complete rigorous analysis, and that what I'm going to share it with you, that okay, as a policy planner, as a natural resource manager, these are the things that we have to look upon when we are analyzing the policies. Even the lecture number 21, we already seen that how to analyze a policy, and this is one of the ways how we are looking at these initial communications in terms of climate change. Over here, let's see that what is the difference between framework and what is a convention. Now, a framework convention is a legally binding international treaty establishing general guidelines and principles for international governance on a particular issue. So we are signatory of a number of conventions, and this is what we mean by the framework convention. More detailed, apart from convention, then we move a little bit further, and what is a protocol? If you have seen, if you have heard the word Kyoto Protocol, Montreal Protocol. So what are protocols? More detailed legal instruments are the protocols which can be attached to a framework convention to address specific aspect of an issue. So first we have a convention, and then we have a protocol which is more legitimate, which is more detailed. Now, let's compare between a protocol and a convention. In terms of convention, what it establishes, it basically tells us the objectives, it tells us the principles, it tells us the basic obligations and the procedures regarding the decision making. These are the four ingredients that are coming in a convention. Now, a protocol A protocol builds on the parent agreement. That is basically what we have done in the convention. It elaborates additional, more specific commitments and institutional arrangements. So protocol is a little bit more detailed. It's a legal document. But in framework convention, we are just giving the guidelines. We are just giving the basic obligations. Now, UNFCCC and Pakistan, we signed the convention on 13th of June 1992. Then we signed it on the Earth Summit in Rio. Then we ratified the convention on the 1st June 1994. And later on, we became legally binding. That is on 30th August 1994. So that was our phase from 1992 till 1994. Now, the first things first. All parties, it was asked that all parties need to develop an initial national communications that we have to submit it from Pakistan to UNFCCC. It contains the inventory of all the greenhouse gases emissions by source and greenhouse gases removals by the sinks. So that was the basic objective that we were supposed to do after 1994. Now, what were the national communications? According to Article number 4 and 12 of the convention, all parties must submit their national communications on regular basis with the following information. So what has to be given in this communication? Number 1, projected anthropogenic greenhouse gases by sources and sinks with the aim of returning them to 1990 levels individually or jointly. And we have to give them the action plan that by 1990 we will return to the same levels by 1990. Policies and measures to limit greenhouse gases and protect, enhance sinks and reservoirs. If you're increasing the sinks or reservoirs, that means more forestation. So these were the basically two of the demands from the convention signatories, that okay, these are the things that we have to communicate them to these parties. Now, the objective of this paper that I am sharing today is to undertake the comparative analysis of the discourses on climate change found in the two policy documents. And the draft climate change policy in 2011, approved in June 2011, and it was formed by Ministry of Environment, Government of Pakistan, at that point of time Ministry of Environment, but now it is Climate Change Division. Now, what method we used in terms of looking at these documents, because it was not just mere reading. We have to follow some policy tool. We have to follow some assessment tool. And what we did, we used critical discourse analysis. It is the study. It is informed by adopting an argumentative turn to study the policy. The comparative analytical framework looks at 4 gaps in the policy. What were the gaps? Number 1 was administrative, number 2 was capacity, number 3 was implementation, and number 4 was finances and research policy gaps. Like, these were the policy gaps we identified while studying these 2 documents. But later on we did the SWOT of the climate change policy. Now, this initial communication that was, initial national communication that was done in 2003. It was submitted in 2003. It was a high-powered project steering committee chaired by the Secretary, Ministry of Environment at that point of time, and comprising of government and private sector experts in the area of climate change. ठीक है, ये सारे लोग थे, इनको हमने 2003 के अंदर इकट्ठा किया, और इसमें क्या हुई? We had 6 meetings and 4 workshops to form this report. अब एक रिपोर्ट आपके पास आ रही है 2003 के अंदर. After 7 years, February 2010 के अंदर प्राइम मिनिस्टर ने क्या किया? एक टास्क सेटअप की, और उसने क्या किया in 2008 to provide guidelines for ensuring security and vital resources of the country. इस टास्क फोर्स ने 10 मीटिंग्स की, 9 वर्किंग ग्रुप्स थे इसके अंदर, और इट वाज बेसिकली अ स्पेड वर्क टू फॉर्मुलेट द इनिशियल क्लाइमेट चेंज पॉलिसी. ठीक है, सो अब नाउ वी हैव 2 रिपोर्ट्स, वन इज द इनिशियल कम्युनिकेशन एंड अनदर वन इज द टास्क फोर्स रिपोर्ट. एक 2003 के अंदर आती है और एक हमारे पास 2010 के अंदर आती है. नाउ दीज आर 2 इंपॉर्टेंट डॉक्यूमेंट्स टू स्टडी दैट. ओके, क्या क्या इनके अंदर सिनर्जीज थी, क्या क्या इनके अंदर ओवरलैपिंग्स थी, और क्या क्या इनके अंदर डिसजॉइंट्स थे. अब जनाब, let's start with the introduction. We now do the comparative analysis. 2003 की रिपोर्ट के अंदर what were the major areas that they were talking about? We were talking about the land area of Pakistan. We were talking about किस किस्म का यहाँ पे climate है, what is the livestock availability, what is the agriculture, forestry, energy and socio-economic conditions. These were the heads in that report in the 2003 one. After 7 years, 2010 की रिपोर्ट में अब हमने क्या किया, नाउ वी आर नॉट मूविंग टुवर्ड्स पाकिस्तान, हमने ग्लोबल क्लाइमेट चेंज के बारे में बात की. उसके बाद क्लाइमेट चेंज सिनेरियो को हमने इसके अंदर इंट्रोड्यूस किया विद रेफरेंस टू पाकिस्तान एंड इम्पैक्ट ऑफ क्लाइमेट चेंज ऑन वेरियस सेक्टर्स ऑफ पाकिस्तान. सो दीज वर द टू थीम्स दैट आर गोइंग ऑन. ऑब्जेक्टिव्स जो हमारे 2003 की रिपोर्ट में थे था ही नहीं कोई. द ऑब्जेक्टिव्स वर वेरी मच अनस्पेसिफाइड इन 2003 क्लाइमेट चेंज रिपोर्ट. जबकि in 2010 the objectives were we have to have a sustained economic growth, we have to have a low carbon economy, then we have to increase the forest cover, then what are the major advancements in the field of science and technology, uske baad what is the role of environmental impact assessment EIA in CCIA and CDM clean development mechanism. अब ग्रीन हाउस गैस एमिटर के हवाले से 2003 और 2010 में जो हमने सेक्टर्स आइडेंटिफाई किया दे वर ऑलमोस्ट सिमिलर. हमने कहा जी एनर्जी सेक्टर, एग्रीकल्चर सेक्टर, वेस्ट, इंडस्ट्रियल प्रोसेसेस और लैंड यूज चेंज, ये हमारे क्या हैं ग्रीन हाउस गैस एमिटर्स हैं. 2003 में भी हमने यही कहा और 2010 में भी हमने यही कहा. अब जो हमने क्लाइमेट चेंज के जो पास्ट और फ्यूचर ट्रेंड्स को देखा तो 2003 के अंदर कोई हमने पास्ट के एमिशंस के बारे में जिक्र नहीं किया हुआ. ठीक है, सो इट इज टोटली अनस्पेसिफाइड. प्रोजेक्टेड के बारे में हमने क्या बात की हुई है, वी हैव मेंशन्ड अबाउट टेम्परेचर, वी मेंशन्ड अबाउट प्रेसिपिटेशन एंड वी मेंशन्ड अबाउट कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड लेवल्स. ये हमने 2003 की रिपोर्ट में किया. 2010 के अंदर पास्ट हमारे पास स्पेसिफाइड था और जो प्रोजेक्टेड था वो हमने टेम्परेचर, एक्सट्रीम इवेंट्स, प्रेसिपिटेशन एंड ग्रीन हाउस गैस लेवल्स की हमने बात कर दी. एक्सट्रीम इवेंट्स को हमने ऐड किया उसके अंदर 2010 के अंदर. अब जो मेजर क्लाइमेट चेंज रिलेटेड कंसर्न्स थे जो हमने 2003 के अंदर आइडेंटिफाई किया कि जी ये हमारे क्लाइमेट चेंज कंसर्न्स हैं, उसमें हमारा वाटर था, एग्रीकल्चर था, फूड था, फॉरेस्ट्री थी, कोस्टल जोन्स, लाइफ स्टॉक, बायोडाइवर्सिटी, इकोसिस्टम्स, सोशियो इकोनॉमिक इम्पैक्ट्स एंड एक्सट्रीम इवेंट्स. जबकि 2010 के अंदर नाउ यू लुक एट द चेंज ऑफ द वर्ड्स, वो जो लिंग्विस्टिक अप्रोच में कह रहा था, अब हमने क्या बात शुरू कर दी, वहां में वाटर अकेला हम कह रहे हैं, यहाँ पे हमने वाटर सिक्योरिटी कह दिया, अब हमने फूड सिक्योरिटी कह दिया, अब हमने एनर्जी सिक्योरिटी कह दिया, कोस्टल एरियाज कह दिया, फॉरेस्ट्स, इकोसिस्टम, सोशियो इकोनॉमिक इम्पैक्ट्स एंड एक्सट्रीम इवेंट्स. मिटिगेशन के हवाले से 2003 और 2010 में हमने एनर्जी, एग्रीकल्चर और फॉरेस्ट्री इन तीनों को लिया कि जो मिटिगेशन के लिए हमें इन तीन सेक्टर्स में ज़रूरत है. अडेप्टेशन में 2003 और 2010 के अंदर वाटर रिसोर्सेज के हवाले से, एग्रीकल्चर के हवाले से, लाइफ स्टॉक्स के हवाले से, फॉरेस्ट्स के हवाले से, कोस्टल जोन्स, बायोडाइवर्सिटी, एनर्जी एंड इंडस्ट्री, सोशियो इकोनॉमिक अडेप्टेशन मेजर्स. लेकिन 2010 के अंदर हमने एक और चीज़ ऐड की, दैट वाज हेल्थ. हेल्थ को हमने एडिशनल रखा, बाकी सारे अडेप्टेशन में थे. ऑर्गेनाइजेशनल स्ट्रक्चर टू एड्रेस क्लाइमेट चेंज. 2003 के अंदर there was just one organizational structure and that was Ministry of Environment. अब देखें आफ्टर 7 years 2010 के अंदर क्या आ जाती है, आपका मीटियोलॉजिकल से आपका आ जाता है, उसके बाद प्राइम मिनिस्टर कमेटी ऑन क्लाइमेट चेंज, उसके बाद आपकी मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ एनवायरनमेंट, उसके बाद आपका प्लानिंग कमीशन, उसके बाद टास्क फोर्स ऑन क्लाइमेट चेंज, उसके बाद आपकी एनजीओज, आपकी मिनिस्ट्रीज. यहाँ पे आपका ऑर्गेनाइजेशन स्ट्रक्चर क्या होता जा रहा है, बड़ा वास्ट होता जा रहा है. ठीक है, बढ़ गया आपका इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर. CDM के हवाले से वी टॉक्ड अबाउट इन क्लीन डेवलपमेंट मैकेनिज्म. दिस इज बेसिकली द सेम कार्बन फाइनेंस की जब हम बात करते हैं. 2003 के अंदर देयर वाज टोटली अनस्पेसिफाइड, कुछ नहीं हमें पता. 2010 के अंदर करंट स्टेटस एंड नीड ऑफ द फर्दर एफर्ट, हमने कहा जी वी हैव एस्टैब्लिश्ड द CDM सेल, हमारे पास कुछ CDM प्रोजेक्ट्स हैं, मेजर्स टू स्ट्रेंथन द CDM सेल और उसके बाद रिकमेंडेड मेजर्स टू इम्प्रूव CDM सेल. यहाँ पे अब हमने 2010 के अंदर CDM को हमने वैल्यू दी. एजुकेशन, कम्युनिकेशन एंड अवेयरनेस, ये हमारा 10th था. उसके अंदर हमने क्या कहा, ग्लोब, जेफ वेबसाइट, उसके बाद इंटरनेशनल सिंपोजियम ऑफ एनर्जी एंड कंजर्वेशन, वर्कशॉप्स हमने कराए, प्रिंट एंड इलेक्ट्रॉनिक मीडिया को हमने यूज़ किया टू एजुकेट पीपल ऑन क्लाइमेट चेंज. 2010 के अंदर हमने बात की कि मेजर स्टेप्स टेकन बाय मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ एनवायरनमेंट विद स्टेक होल्डर्स टू फॉर्मुलेट सस्टेन्ड कम्युनिकेशन स्ट्रैटेजी एंड फैसिलिटेट नेशनल क्लाइमेट चेंज एक्शंस इन पाकिस्तान। अब इंस्टीट्यूशनल कैपेसिटी जो कि हम बात कर रहे थे, विच विल एड्रेस द क्लाइमेट चेंज, इन 2003 देयर वाज ओनली वन, दैट वाज मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ एनवायरनमेंट। 2010 के अंदर हम क्या कहते हैं, मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ एनवायरनमेंट है, GCICS, ये एक आपका थिंक टैंक छोटा सा बनाया UNFCCC की फंडिंग से इस्लामाबाद के अंदर, जो कि प्रोजेक्शंस करता है, मॉडल्स को यूज़ करता है टू लुक एट द एग्रीकल्चर वाटर सिचुएशन इन फ्यूचर विद रेफरेंस टू क्लाइमेट चेंज। PMD पाकिस्तान मीटियोलॉजिकल डिपार्टमेंट, उसके मिनिस्ट्रीज, गवर्नमेंट फंडेड ऑर्गेनाइजेशन, इंटरनेशनल ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस और आपकी NGOs, ये सारी 2010 के अंदर हमें इंस्टीट्यूशनल कैपेसिटी के हवाले से आई। उसके बाद इंटरनेशनल कोऑपरेशन में वी हैड ओनली इंटरनेशनल ट्रीटीज 2003 में। 2010 के अंदर वी टॉक्ड अबाउट मिटिगेशन एफर्ट्स, वी टॉक अबाउट अडेप्टेशन एफर्ट्स, वी टॉक अबाउट कैपेसिटी बिल्डिंग एंड वी टॉक अबाउट रीजनल कोलैबोरेशन। Now, by just looking at these comparisons, you can see 2010 के अंदर we are progressing. After 7 years हमारे actors, stakeholders, हमारी information क्या होती जा रही है, increase करती जा रही है। उसके बाद international negotiations for future climate related concerns. 2003 totally unspecified, कुछ नहीं उसके अंदर बताया हुआ, जबकि 2010 के अंदर we have mentioned mitigation effort by Annex 1 countries. Remember that in UNFCCC there are two countries, one is Annex 1 and another one is Annex 2. Annex 1 are the developed countries and Annex 2 are the developing countries. Developed countries जिन्होंने climate change ये सारा haphazard कर दिया हुआ है, now they are helping the Annex 2 countries for adaptation and for other mechanisms. Mitigation effort by Pakistan and non-annex countries. Adaptation by Pakistan and other non-annex 1 countries. टेक्निकल कोऑपरेशन की हमने बात की, टेक्नोलॉजी ट्रांसफ़र और कैपेसिटी बिल्डिंग की हम इसके अंदर बात करते हैं कि हम फ्यूचर क्लाइमेट कंसर्न्स को हम किस तरीके से टैकल करेंगे। अब आ जाता है हमारे क्रिटिकल एनालिसिस। नंबर 1, इन इंट्रोडक्शन वी हैव टेकन 11 वेरिएबल्स इनटू अकाउंट। ठीक है, 11 हमने वेरिएबल्स लिए। नंबर 1, 2003 के अंदर रिपोर्ट के अंदर व्हाट वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट जनरल ओवरव्यू ऑफ पाकिस्तान्स नेशनल सर्कमस्टांसेस इंक्लूडिंग क्लाइमेटिक कंडीशंस, सोशियो इकोनॉमिक कंडीशंस एंड एनवायरमेंटल इश्यूज। वी कंसिडर ओवरऑल वेरिएबल्स, कंट्रीब्यूशन टू GDP, नॉट क्लाइमेट चेंज वाज मेंशन। कोई उसके अंदर हमने क्लाइमेट चेंज रिलेटेड बात नहीं की। क्लाइमेट सिनेरियो ऑफ पाकिस्तान वाज नॉट इवन एट ऑल मेंशन्ड। ठीक है ना, नाउ दैट इज कि आप एक इनिशियल कम्युनिकेशन जमा करवा रहे हैं एंड कोई हमने क्लाइमेट सिनेरियो पाकिस्तान का जमा ही नहीं करवाया। 2010 के अंदर वी एनालाइज द ग्लोबल एंड पाकिस्तान सिनेरियो ऑफ क्लाइमेट चेंज। ऑब्जेक्टिव्स के हवाले से अगर हम बात करें, सो in 2003 report there are no objectives, there are no basic goals. It presented a very weak policy of climate change policy guiding principle, and according to Article 12, non-annex parties are required to submit national inventory of anthropogenic emissions by sources and removals. This report mainly highlights this goal कि जी ये हमारा गोल था। ठीक है, 2010 contained detailed basic goals and objectives. अब 2003 का देख लें, पाकिस्तान एज अ गैस एमिटर, ये हमारा है जी टोटल 181 मीट्रिक टन है, और यहाँ पे हमारी 2010 के अंदर हमारी क्या हो जाती है, 309 मेट्रिक टन आपकी आ जाती है। एनर्जी सेक्टर 3% आपका इंक्रीज हो गया, पहले 47 था, बाद में 50 हो गया। उसके बाद आपका इंडस्ट्रियल पहले 7.3 था, बाद में 5.8 हो गया, यानी इंडस्ट्री ने आपका कम हुआ। एग्रीकल्चर पहले 39 था, एग्रीकल्चर भी आपका कम हो गया, 38 हो गया। उसके बाद आपके जो वेस्ट थे वो भी कम हो गए, यानी एनर्जी का ज़्यादा कंट्रीब्यूशन रहा। देन पास्ट एंड फ्यूचर क्लाइमेट चेंजेस इन पाकिस्तान। 2003 रिपोर्ट के बारे में मैंने आपको पहले ही बताया दैट इन 2003 रिपोर्ट आर पास्ट ट्रेंड्स वर एब्सेंट, नथिंग ऑफ दैट सॉर्ट। यानी आप 2003 में जमा करा रहे हैं, पिछला कोई हमारे पास कोई डाटा या कोई रिकॉर्ड है ही नहीं। प्रोजेक्टेड ट्रेंड्स में क्या हुआ, वी मेंशन फॉर टेम्परेचर, प्रेसिपिटेशन एंड कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड लेवल, वो भी कब के, 1961 और 1990 के। ठीक है, एक्सट्रीम मोमेंट्स इसमें भी एब्सेंट थे। 2010 के अंदर it was a detailed version of the observed were based on data over the last century, and projected trends variables were based on 1960 और 1990 की वैल्यूज आपने ली हुई थी। मेजर क्लाइमेट चेंज रिलेटेड कंसर्न्स 2003 रिपोर्ट में, it does not categorize the major sectors of importance to Pakistan in context of climate change, under which related subsectors could be categorized. Rather, it provides data on overall potential threatening sectors. So it was very general, it was not even specific. 2010 के अंदर little better, it highlights 3 major sectors that are important for Pakistan in terms of climate change and its impacts, and these sectors are water, food and energy security. ये 3 highlighted sectors. Other relevant sectors are categorized as subsectors under these major headings. So 3 हमने यहाँ पे major, लेकिन 2003 report के अंदर we haven't talked about it. Talk about mitigation. Mitigation में हमने 3 यहाँ पे sectors लिए, energy, agriculture and forestry. Let me just tell you what is mitigation. Mitigation is just stopping all the carbon emissions. आप कहते हो जी हम रोक देते हैं. 2003 में mitigation measures were analyzed in terms of mitigation costs along with total carbon dioxide abated and net present value NPV आपने ली. Ongoing and planned actions were unspecified. कुछ नहीं उन्होंने उसके बारे में बताया. 2010 में आपने general measures mention किए. Recommended plus ongoing and planned actions are mentioned all, जो कि 2003 में absent थे. Analyzation in terms of mitigation cost हमने की along with total carbon dioxide abated and net present value are absent. 2003 में वो present थे, but यहाँ पे क्या हो गया, उन्होंने बिल्कुल delete कर दिया. Adaptation के हवाले से the sectors that we chose was water, agriculture, rangeland, coastal areas, forest, health, extreme events and socio-economic conditions and biodiversity. अब 2003 में हमने ओवरऑल अडेप्टेशन मेजर्स बयान किए. उसके बाद हेल्थ सेक्टर की अडेप्टेशन टोटली डिलीट कर दी, इन्फॉर्म ही नहीं की. और जो लोकल कम्युनिटीज, जो कि हम बात कर रहे हैं कि लोकल कम्युनिटीज आर वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट, दैट वाज टोटली मिसिंग इन 2003 रिपोर्ट. 2010 के अंदर we did talked about in-depth adaptation measures considering the particular requirements for each sector. We recommended measures, ongoing and planned actions are mentioned, and input for local communities was again missing. हमने local communities को डाला ही नहीं किसी खाते में. Then administrative capacity and implementation. While both reports outline who and which department is responsible for what, there is no overarching monitoring and evaluation mechanism. अभी हम evaluation की बात करते हैं, दोनों में कोई evaluation है नहीं. To determine if responsibilities set in 2003 and subsequently in 2010 were accomplished or not. कि जो आपने चीज़ें 2003 में promise की थी, the future steps, whether वो 2010 के अंदर हमने accomplish की या नहीं की, कोई उसकी monitoring and evaluation framework नहीं था. Neither कोई 2010 की report में वो mention की गई. Since there are no time-bound objectives, there are no time-bound objectives कि हम इस साल तक ये काम करेंगे और next year हम ये काम करेंगे, there was nothing like that. Temporal comparisons can't be made either. Mitigation and adaptations measures are mentioned. ज़रूर हमने mention किया, but they are without any timeline कि कब तक हमने इनको achieve करना. So it's all general gupshup. Both reports do not set a framework for implementation. दोनों reports में कुछ भी नहीं था with reference to the implementation framework. Now these are the government communication, the reports that are being sent to all international community that this is the state of climate change in Pakistan. Most of the adaptation and mitigation measures that were mentioned in both the reports require vast technologies and extensive research for which no specific activities roles were defined in 2010, while in 2003 they focused on research programs. उन्हें सिर्फ mention किया था, but unfortunately we haven't seen any. Mechanisms for collaboration वो दोनों में missing थी. Knowledge sharing between NGOs, universities and Ministry of Environment was missing. No mention is made either dearth nor availability of real climate scientists, ecological climate economists in the country or MOE. कहीं पे कोई climate economist लिया ही नहीं गया. ठीक है? Then critical gaps, हमारे policy and research gaps में. अब 2003 की जो रिपोर्ट है वो डेटा कहाँ से ले रही है? 1993 और 1994 का. 2010 की जो रिपोर्ट है that is taking data from 2007 and 2008. So 2010 की जो रिपोर्ट है it's more of like an assessment report, but कुछ नहीं उन्होंने बताया कि future research हमारी future research requirements like the 2003 report. 2003 ने कुछ future research के बारे में बताया था, लेकिन 2010 ने तो वो भी नहीं बताया. उसके बाद the reports are completely disconnected, right? They're completely disconnected in terms of continuity of the projects and policy. Both the reports are made as seems as if they are made in isolation. हमने पिछली report को study नहीं किया. Then data is inconsistent in both the reports. ठीक है? उसके बाद data sources are different. जो आप 2003 के अंदर जो आप data sources use कर रहे हैं वो हम 2010 में तो उनको हमने देखा ही नहीं. So there is no way one can determine the authenticity and cross-checking. Most of the content and observations based are on World Bank, United Nations report. International हमने sources use किए हैं. Very little use of locally research organizations like WWF, PIDE, SDPI. और यही बात मैंने last lecture में भी आपको बताई थी that we do not have the depth of research. पाकिस्तानी research है ही नहीं. We are just counting on the meta-analysis or the number crunching done by World Bank or UN. ठीक है, हमारे पास अपनी dearth of research, there is nothing available. So what are these policy institutes doing when they are getting so much of climate funding? Nothing. And baseline data and subsequent comparisons are missing. कोई हमने baseline data के साथ कोई comparisons किए ही नहीं. उसके बाद finances. No cost benefit analysis done in either. दोनों में हमने ये भी देखा था one of the assessment tools is the cost benefit analysis. अब technology की बात कर रहे हैं, adaptation की बात कर रहे हैं, mitigation की बात कर रहे हैं, so we should have done cost benefit analysis, but in both the reports cost benefit analysis is missing. No mention of annual budgets set aside for climate related activity. आपने even budget तक decide नहीं किया that this amount of money will be kept for climate change related activities. In particular, even though both reports claims that Pakistan is extremely threatened and vulnerable to climate change. Yani on one side we are mentioning that okay it is highly vulnerable, but on the other side we are not even bothered कि जी आपने इतना budget उसके लिए मखसूस किया हुआ है for the climate change related activities in both the reports. May it be 2003, may it be 2010. Now, where do we head on? Initial communication हमने की 2003 report. फिर हमने कहा जी 2010 के अंदर हमारी टास्क फोर्स की एक ऑफिशियल रिपोर्ट आ गई. अब कहाँ पे चलें? Let's go to another standing committee and another report. और वो हमारी another report कौन सी होगी? पाकिस्तान's first climate change policy. ठीक है, अब पाकिस्तान की जो पहली climate change policy है, it is one of the few developing countries which has prepared such comprehensive national policy on subject which is on top of global priority agenda, maybe after war on terror. ये कौन हमारे फरमा रहे हैं? डॉक्टर कमरुज़्ज़मान चौधरी, who is the former Director General of Meteorological Department of Pakistan and he is the lead author of our national climate change policy. Top priority after war on terror. और अगर आपने पिछली दोनों रिपोर्टों का भी कंपैरिजन देखा है, we don't have a budget. We have used different timelines. We are not time-bound objectives. We have no finances for that. And still it is our number one priority after war on terror. Now, the main objective of the policy is to sustain economic growth by addressing the challenges of climate change. Yes, that is why we are making the policy. Ab Adil Najam, Boston University, or he was one of the authors in IPCC also. He says, I think what the draft says is correct, but may already have been said in the whole host of policy documents, जो हमारी पिछली communications है. The challenge is to turn the general statements into specific targets and timetables. कि जी हमें उसमें time-bound objectives डालने. That's what Adil Najam said. Now, who will implement the policy? तो चौधरी साहब कहते हैं an action plan is the next priority and the next step I hope it will be ready in few months. And today it's 2014. More standing committees for implementations. Now April 2011 आ जाता है and let's see how our national climate change policy looks like. It's basically the framework for addressing the issues of climate change related to Pakistan. ठीक है, एक framework उसने हमें बता दिया है. Then inputs for this policy document includes, कहाँ से हमें inputs मिले इस policy को form करने के लिए? Task Force on Climate Change जो बनी थी, जिन्होंने ये report बनाई थी. Then consultation with the provinces, उसके बाद federal institutions, civil society. Local people again missing. I did met Dr. Kamar and he said, well, they were involved, but I doubt, because the people whom I met in the local, they don't even know that we have a climate change policy. Anyway, however, sets a comprehensive framework for development for action plan for national effort on adaptation and mitigation. Reviewing and updating of policy to reach the emerging concepts and issues over evolving science of climate change. That is also one of the objectives. अब इस पॉलिसी की हमारे पास स्ट्रेंथ्स क्या है? ठीक है, now it has a specified goal along with clear objectives. The national climate change policy. The vulnerability of Pakistan to climate change. Specifying adaptation and mitigation options, policy options, उसने define की हुई है. उसके बाद gender, poverty, disaster preparedness have been brought to front in tackling with climate crisis. Town planning in mitigation as an emerging concept. वही जो मैंने land use planning बताया था, town planning, ठीक है, urban sprawl की जब मैं बात कर रहा था, so यहाँ पे एक mitigation के लिए उन्होंने ये एक strategy use की. उसके बाद policy implementation mechanism also serves as a main feature. Now that was the strength of our national climate change policy. A weakness क्या है हमारी इस national climate change policy के अंदर? Number one, policy options to improve climate change scenario is without any timeline. Still, there is no timeline into it. कि जी कब तक हमारा ये climate change scenario better होगा? A conceptual framework to achieve the goal to tackle climate change remains unspecified. It is there, but it is unspecified. Then, how these policy options will reduce and contribute to lowering carbon emissions are not mentioned. We have just told what to do. We haven't told how to do it and how it will improve the situation. It is not mentioned in our climate change policy. Gender is mentioned, जो कि मैंने उसकी strength बयान की थी, that okay, we have brought gender into it, but it is more like cumbersome add-on. It's just an addition. We don't have a right route कि जी gender किस तरह role play करता है in terms of your climate change mitigation or adaptation. Adaptation measures are mainly focused on developing resilience of agriculture, water and power sectors, in spite of the fact that development and modification of infrastructure and urban development should be given equal focus. यानी आपने सिर्फ adaptation में you have just worked on this agriculture, water and power sectors, but आपने बिल्कुल urban को फिर से भूल गए. Again, if you recall my lecture on land use planning, I said कि जी when we are talking about these big environmental problems, we just think about the rural structures. हम urbans को बिल्कुल ही ख़त्म कर देते हैं. Mega cities ये जो concepts हैं, smart growth we totally eliminated. We just think कि urbans is not part of any environmental problem, even though they are part of it. And the same problem happened that in our climate change policy, it is absent. उसके बाद, the policy appears to be test tube development. Since 2003, communication and 2010 task force are not used as baseline and even strong reference documents. 3 documents, 2003 initial communication, 2010 task force, और जब ये नई policy बनी है, उसने इस policy ने उन दोनों documents को use ही नहीं किया हुआ है. They are not used as a strong documents के भी. These are our official communication. So we should be using them in terms of building up a policy which is for the whole country, which is a social outcome, which is becoming quite critical when they say, okay, it is the second priority after war on terror, but we haven't used those. So what was the cost of that hard work, of all that workshops that were conducted, of all those meetings, consultations that taken place in 2003 and in 2010 for the formation of these reports, when you're not even using these reports for your for the formulation of your climate change policy. So that is where I say there's divergence. There is a gap. There is a disconnect that we have formed. We have worked on a report and we are not using it as a baseline. We are talking about these objectives, we are talking about things that we have to do, but they are totally timeless, without time bounds. We are talking about adaptation frameworks, but abhi main aage uski aur weaknesses batata hu, that from where the money is going to come. ठीक है? I haven't seen the involvement of private sector in the climate change policy. Now, only theoretical promises of increased investment in research for climate change mitigation and adaptation. Again, the budget is absent. That okay, this much amount of money or 5% or 10% of that of the budget allocated will be devoted for research. Nothing of that sort. These are all theoretical promises. Cost of achieving policy options is not even calculated. Yani we have said कि जी हम अपना alternative energy पे चले जाएंगे हमें, but that costs money. From where that finance is going to come, it has not been calculated. Various policy measures are outlined, but no directions are given. How and when they will be achieved and for how much. Very critical. That it is just another कि जी मैं आपको कहता हूँ be a good boy, but I don't tell you that how, that I don't know when, that I don't know how much change you have to incur. So these are just mere statements that okay, it's just that okay, we wanted to have one policy, we made that policy, but where is the implementation? How you are going to evaluate the policy when there are no costs, there are no alternatives, when there are no benefits, when there are no timelines given into it. Then एक हमने बात की थी कि दो ग्रीन क्लाइमेट फंड, एक अडेप्टेशन फंड है, जेफ है, CDM है, वर्ल्ड बैंक्स फॉरेस्ट कार्बन पार्टनरशिप figure in the policy as mechanism from which money will be obtained. ये हमने चीज़ें मेंशन की हैं. एक आपका ग्रीन क्लाइमेट फंड है, एक आपका अडेप्टेशन फंड है जो आपकी Annex 1 कंट्रीज़ ने क्या किया हुआ, इन सारों ने कोलैबोरेट करके एक आपका फंड बनाया हुआ है which will be given to the developing countries so that they can help in terms of adaptation. उसके बाद फिर आपका ग्लोबल इन्वायरमेंटल फंड है, उसके बाद आपका क्लीन डेवलपमेंट मैकेनिज्म है, फिर आपका वर्ल्ड बैंक का एक फॉरेस्ट पार्टनर. ये सोर्सेज उन्होंने बताई हैं कि यहाँ से पैसे आपको मिलेंगे, बट वी रिमेन क्लूलेस अबाउट कौन करेगा और ये कब होगा. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, there are 11 projects from Pakistan that have been registered with UNFCCC. सिर्फ 11 हुए हैं since the introduction of CDM, and total amount of $273 million have been invested in these projects, which is just 0.27% of the total spending by countries in Asia and Pacific region. And we are just boasting कि 11 हमारे projects CDM के लिए गए हुए हैं, which is a tiny thing as compared to India, as compared to other developing countries. So we are not even reaping the benefits out of there. अब एक और एनालिसिस मैं आपको बताता हूँ कि जो हमारे पॉलिसी ऑप्शंस हैं, those are totally unrealistic. जो हमने पॉलिसी ऑप्शंस वहाँ पर दिए, they are not real, they are not time bound, they are not telling us किस तरह किया जाए. उसके बाद जो पॉलिसी मेजर्स दिए गए हैं, pick out any policy, any document, and the same policy measures are given over there. They are quite redundant. I don't see any creative or innovative actions which are, we can say, which are under the umbrella of Pakistan, which measures it with reference to Pakistan. Then there are implementation issues. We have already covered it with reference to the implementation issue. कि implement कैसे होगा, क्योंकि कोई framework है ही नहीं. There is no implementation strategies, there is no framework that how you are going to, whatever you are saying, they are just theoretical things, how you are going to implement those things. उसके बाद 18th amendment जब से आई कि जी आपकी जो भी आपकी फेडरल से आपकी सारी वो जो हैं responsibilities और जो funding है, जो decision making है, that has moved towards the provincial, then how this climate change policy is going to be in interplay. the mechanism is not given over there. ठीक है. अब provinces के पास जो भी policy जाती है, they are clueless what to do because the goals are totally unachievable. ठीक है. Capacity building and institutional strengthening issues. आपने कह तो दिया कि हमने ये करनी है capacity building, but there is no budget, there is nothing. Just by saying it doesn't mean that it is going to happen. ठीक है. उसके बाद lax consultation with Pakistan's national security. I told you कि अगर आप सियाचिन का ग्लेशियर देखो तो it is becoming quite strong. अब आपके नेशनल सिक्योरिटी इश्यूज आते जा रहे हैं. क्लाइमेट चेंज पॉलिसी के अंदर आपकी नेशनल सिक्योरिटी का जिक्र ही नहीं है. एंड व्हेन दीज ग्लेशियर्स और व्हेन दीज एनवायरनमेंट, व्हेन द वाटर सिक्योरिटी इश्यूज आर गोइंग टू कम अप, आपकी नेशनल सिक्योरिटी के ऑटोमेटिकली इश्यूज आ जाते हैं. ठीक है. आर वी इवन थिंकिंग अबाउट दोज थिंग्स? नो, none of the neither 2003, 2010 or even the climate policy talked about the national security thing. उसके बाद lax consultation with relevant stakeholders. One of the issues that I have found was कि आपके जो stakeholders थे उसके अंदर in this report, it was majorly missing your private sector. Private sector is one of the movers and shakers in Pakistan, and when I say one of the movers and shakers, because if you see the private corporate sector has increased remarkably. And they are the engines of your economic growth, and when they are doing and you are not involving them, उनके लिए क्या benefit है? Why Siemens or Ufone or these companies will be interested in terms of climate change adaptation or mitigation? How they can be involved? I don't see the involvement of the private sector into it. ठीक है. उसके बाद हमारे जो stakeholders absent हैं, that is also one of the issues, and it does not based on empirical evidences. We do not see much of the empirical evidence into it. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'll keep this till this point. Now I'll show you one of the small clips of Al Gore that I was talking about, and it's like 10 to 12 minutes clip in which you will see that how Al Gore talks about this climate change crisis and climate change happening in the developed countries and how it is going to impact the developing countries. Just have a look at it, that and as I always say, that when you are looking at the TED presentations, just don't look at the context, always look the way he is presenting his substance, the way he grips the audience, and the way he gets the applaud. That is remarkable. So look at this clip, and later on I'll just conclude the lecture that what we are missing in this actually policy and how we can improve these policy options.
Thank you so much, Chris, and it's truly a great honor to have the opportunity to come to this stage twice. I'm extremely grateful. I have been blown away by this conference, and I want to thank all of you for the many nice comments about what I had to say the other night. And I say that sincerely, partly because I need that. Put yourselves in my position. I flew on Air Force 2 for 8 years. Now I have to take off my shoes or boots to get on an airplane. I'll tell you one quick story to illustrate what that's been like for me. It's a true story. Every bit of this is true. Soon after Tipper and I left the White House, we were driving from our home in Nashville to a little farm we have 50 miles east of Nashville. Driving ourselves. I know that sounds like a little thing to you, but I looked in the rearview mirror, and all of a sudden it just hit me. There was no motorcade back there. You've heard of phantom limb pain? This was a rented Ford Taurus. It was dinner time, and we started looking for a place to eat. We were on I-40. We got to exit 238, Lebanon, Tennessee. We got off the exit, started looking. We found a Shoney's restaurant, low-cost family restaurant chain, for those of you who don't know it. We went in and sat down at the booth, and the waitress came over, made a big commotion over tipper. She took our order and then went to the couple in the booth next to us, and she lowered her voice so much I had to really strain to hear what she was saying. And she said, "Yes, that's former Vice President Al Gore and his wife, Tipper." And the man said, "He's come down a long way, hasn't he?" There's been kind of a series of epiphanies. The very next day, continuing a totally true story, I got on a G5 to fly to Africa to make a speech in Nigeria in the city of Lagos on the topic of energy. And I began the speech by telling them the story of what had just happened the day before in Nashville. And I told it pretty much the same way I've just shared it with you. Tipper and I were driving ourselves, Shoney's, low-cost family restaurant chain, what the man said. They laughed. I gave my speech, then went back out to the airport to fly back home. I fell asleep on the plane until during the middle of the night we landed on the Azores Islands for refueling. I woke up, they opened the door, I went out to get some fresh air, and I looked, and there was a man running across the runway. And he was waving a piece of paper, and he was yelling, "Call Washington! Call Washington!" And I thought to myself, in the middle of the night, middle of the Atlantic, what in the world could be wrong in Washington? I remembered it could be a bunch of things. But what it turned out to be was that my staff was extremely upset because one of the wire services in Nigeria had already written a story about my speech, and it had already been printed in cities all across the United States of America. It's printed in Monterey, I checked. And the story began, former Vice President Al Gore announced in Nigeria yesterday, quote, "My wife Tipper and I have opened a low-cost family restaurant named Shoney's, and we are running it ourselves." Before I could get back to U.S. soil, David Letterman and Jay Leno had already started in on. One of them had me in a big white chef's hat. Tipper was saying, "One more burger with fries." 3 days later, I got a nice, long, handwritten letter from my friend and partner and colleague, Bill Clinton, saying, "Congratulations on the new restaurant out." We like to celebrate each other's successes in life. I was going to talk about information ecology, but I was thinking that since I plan to make a lifelong habit of coming back to TED, that maybe I could talk about that another time.
It's a deal.
Okay. I want to focus on what many of you have said you would like me to elaborate on. What can you do about the climate crisis? I want to start with a couple of, I'm going to show some new images, and I'm going to recapitulate just 4 or 5. Now, the slideshow. I update the slideshow every time I give it. I add new images because I learn more about it every time I give it. It's like beachcombing, you know? Every time the tide comes in and out, you find some more shells. Just in the last 2 days, we got the new temperature records in January. This is just for the United States of America. Historical average for January's is 31 degrees. Last month was 39.5 degrees. Now, I know that you wanted some more bad news about the environment. I'm kidding. But these are the recapitulation slides, and then I'm going to go into new material about what you can do. But I wanted to elaborate on a couple of these. First of all, this is where we're projected to go with the U.S. contribution to global warming under business as usual. Efficiency in end-use electricity and in-use of all energy is the low-hanging fruit. Efficiency and conservation. It's not a cost, it's a profit. The sign is wrong. It's not negative, it's positive. These are investments that pay for themselves, but they are also very effective in deflecting our path. Cars and trucks. I talked about that in the slideshow, but I want you to put it in perspective. It's an easy, visible target of concern, and it should be, but there is more global warming pollution that comes from buildings than from cars and trucks. Cars and trucks are very significant, and we have the lowest standards in the world, and so we should address that, but it's part of the puzzle. Other transportation efficiency is as important as cars and trucks. Renewables at the current levels of technological efficiency can make this much difference, and with what Vinod and John Doerr and others, many of you here, a lot of people directly involved in this wedge is going to grow much more rapidly than the current projection shows it. Carbon capture and sequestration, that's what CCS stands for, is likely to become the killer app that will enable us to continue to use fossil fuels in a way that is safe. Not quite there yet. Okay, now, what can you do? Reduce emissions in your home. Most of these expenditures are also profitable. Insulation, better design, buy green electricity where you can. I mentioned automobiles. Buy a hybrid. Use light rail. Figure out some of the other options that are much better. It's important. Be a green consumer. You have choices with everything you buy between things that have a harsh effect or a much less harsh effect on the global climate crisis. Consider this. Make a decision to live a carbon neutral life. Those of you who are good at branding, I'd love to get your advice and help on how to say this in a way that connects with the most people. It is easier than you think. It really is. A lot of us in here have made that decision, and it is really pretty easy. It means reduce your carbon dioxide emissions with the full range of choices that you make, and then purchase or acquire offsets for the remainder that you have not completely reduced. And what it means is elaborated at climatecrisis.net. There is a carbon calculator. Participant Productions convened with my active involvement, the leading software writers in the world on this arcane science of carbon calculation to construct a consumer-friendly carbon calculator. You can very precisely calculate what your CO2 emissions are, and then you will be given options to reduce, and by the time the movie comes out in May, this will be updated to 2.0, and we will have click-through purchases of offsets. Next, consider making your business carbon neutral. Again, some of us have done that, and it's not as hard as you think. Integrate climate solutions into all of your innovations, whether you are from the technology or entertainment or design and architecture community. Invest sustainably. Majora mentioned this. Listen, if you have invested money with managers who you compensate on the basis of their annual performance, don't ever again complain about quarterly report CEO management. Over time, people do what you pay them to do. And if they judge how much they're going to get paid on your capital that they've invested based on the short-term returns, you're going to get short-term decisions. A lot more to be said about that. Become a catalyst of change, teach others, learn about it, talk about it. The movie comes out, the movie is a movie version of the slideshow that I gave 2 nights ago, except it's a lot more entertaining. And it comes out in May. Many of you here have the opportunity to ensure that a lot of people see it. Consider sending somebody to Nashville, pick well, and I am personally going to train people to give this slideshow, repurposed with some of the personal stories, obviously replaced with a generic approach, and it's not just the slides, it's what they mean, and it's how they link together. And so I'm going to be conducting a course this summer for a group of people that are nominated by different folks to come and then give it en masse in communities all across the country, and we're going to update the slideshow for all of them every single week to keep it right on the cutting edge. Working with Larry Lessig, it will be at somewhere in that process posted with tools and limited use copyrights so that young people can remix it and use it and do it in their own way. Where did anybody get the idea that you ought to stay arm's length from politics? It doesn't mean that I'm trying to convince, if you're a Republican, that I'm trying to convince you to be a Democrat. We need Republicans as well. It used to be a bipartisan issue, and I know that in this group it really is. Become politically active. Make our democracy work the way it's supposed to work. Support the idea of capping carbon dioxide emissions, global warming pollution, and trading it. Here's why. As long as the United States is out of the world system, it's not a closed system. Once it becomes a closed system with U.S. participation, then everybody who's on a board of directors, how many people here serve on the board of directors of a corporation? Once it's a closed system, you will have legal liability if you do not urge your CEO to get the maximum income from reducing and trading the carbon emissions that can be avoided. The market will work to solve this problem if we can accomplish this. Help with a mass persuasion campaign that will start this spring. We have to change the minds of the American people because presently the politicians do not have permission to do what needs to be done. And in our modern country, the role of logic and reason no longer includes mediating between wealth and power the way it once did. It's now repetition of short, hot button, 30-second, 28-second television ads. We have to buy a lot of those ads. Let's rebrand global warming, as many of you have suggested. I like climate crisis instead of climate collapse, but again, those of you who are good at branding, I need your help on this. Somebody said the test we're facing now, a scientist told me, is whether the combination of an opposable thumb and a neocortex is a viable combination. That's really true. I said the other night, and I'll repeat now, this is not a political issue. Again, the Republicans here, this shouldn't be partisan. You have more influence than some of us who are Democrats do. This is an opportunity, not just this, but connected to the ideas that are here, to bring more coherence to them. We are one. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Okay, I hope you like this algo clip, and now coming on to the conclusion that with reference to climate change, Pakistan has a long way to go into the even understanding the climate change problem. We are still lacking the understanding with reference to the climate science, and vulnerability index has to be developed. Usually we have these country indices, but just now and at PIDE we did the research, and now the indices have been calculated at the district levels, and it is based on scientific data and how the local communities are being impacted by it. Then a different way of targeting climate change questions should be done based on real-time baseline, run field research rather than number crunching and rehearsing statistics based on donor project reports or your outdated government documents. And Pakistan's stance on international climate change platforms need to be stronger, well-informed and consistent. Well, at the moment, need for National Commission is that we have to coordinate these climate change activities, monitor and assess the emissions of greenhouse gases, monitor and assess impacts of national climate change and weather conditions on oceans, snow and glaciers, citizens and Pakistan's ecosystems and natural resources. That all concludes today's session, and just have an overview that how we have the disconnected documents and even a climate change policy. Now, as students of public policy, as students of public administration, we need to see that where is the disconnect and how, when we as managers are in the positions, how we can take a corrective action. Thank you very much.